God honors them. I'm now going to ask my friend Afra. Afra is my khizr, or the person who walks with me sometimes, and suddenly I think of her, and she comes up with some explanation which triggers and remains with me for years. I met both Nima and Afra about 8 years ago, and Sumbul, of course, more recently, and Ruqayya now. Asmi I've known for a very long time. She's also going to just tell us about a little of the work that she does. And we are Muslims, we believe in Qalu Bala. So somehow, all these women friends of mine, especially those who are on the panel, when we meet each other, we are like we've never been separated. We are one soul. And we recognize each other from the Alami Arwa, because that's how the only, that's where we recognize when God got all the souls together and asked them, who is your creator? And they testified, you indeed, Qalu Bala, Beshak. हमने गवाही दी कि तू ही हमारा रब है. So I think there's a very strong connection. I feel that with my dearest Afra, who I love so deeply. I love Nima, everybody here, all the women here. So I'm going to ask Afra, who's from Syria. She's based in Canada, and she works with also with bringing about peace in the Syrian context. Lectures. She's a great admirer of Gandhi, and who has also inspired her, along with other great leaders and prophets. And she just has this amazing, amazing knowledge of Islamic traditions and brings to it a beautiful understanding. Afra, India awaits you. The hall awaits you.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. When Sadia talks about me, I want to meet that woman. So she raised your expectations. I will bring you back to reality. I am honored to be in India. It's the land of spirituality and peace, and the means of non-violent liberation. I have always been inspired by the work of Gandhi.
Just a minute. We don't want to be disturbed. We'll do it later, please. No disturbance.
Please continue.
Yeah.
So I have been inspired by the work of Gandhi. And then a few years ago, I discovered the work of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Badshah Khan. And it is sad that many Muslims don't know about this giant, literally in both senses of the term. He was a big, tall man, but he was also large in so many ways. And the beauty of their work is that these two leaders came from their respective religious traditions as two true brothers and worked in liberating India through nonviolent means from both the Muslim perspective and the Hindu perspective, realizing that they were coming from truth and working for truth without feeling superior or inferior to each other. It was true brotherhood. It was true equality. This morning, I was sharing with some friends, including Sheikh Kabir and my sister Ruqayya, how one of the beautiful cosmic jokes is that truth is captured in the poem of Rumi, that truth was one mirror, and then it was smashed and it became small pieces, reflecting truth from various angles. So truth is reflected back to all of us from our various perspectives and cultures. Nobody has the monopoly of truth. We need each other. And that's the beauty of India. You have so many communities working together, and you have the largest functioning democracy in the world with so many languages and so many ethnicities. It inspires all of us. Do not underestimate the legacy you can share with the rest of the world. The reason I appreciate nonviolence, it's not because of a dreamy idealist stand. It's because it's a practical methodology of changing ourselves before we change the world. Because it's about transforming our attitude before we transform the attitude of others. It's the paradigm shift of humanity. My specialty in my area of research is Quranic hermeneutics, which is a big academic word to say the art and science of interpretation. And I would like to take you through the landscape of some passages in the Quran that capture this shift from the model of coercion to the model of non-coercion. One of the opening scenes in the Quran about creation is the announcement of God to the angels. God says, "Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa." I shall place upon the earth a khalifa, a deputy, a divine representative. The angels panic. قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمد ربك ونقدس لك. They said, are you going to place upon it those who shall spread corruption and spill blood while we hold your glory and recite your names? And the answer is very interesting. It's not yes or no. God says, إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون. I know that which you know not. It's possibility. It's a sense of possibility. We could go this way or that way. But also when you think about it, it's an answer to the angels' worst expectations of our species, to which we are witness. And yet, the answer to that is stretching the horizon to a new possibility, God's knowing within ourselves. We have not achieved that divine knowing in ending corruption and spilling blood. We are still fulfilling the worst expectations of the angels. That story encapsulates the malaise of humanity, the challenge, which is domination resulting in bloodshed. Bloodshed is always connected to hierarchies and to injustice and to corruption and to stealing, which is why the longest running story throughout the Quranic landscape and the repetitive story is the modality of Pharaoh and the encounter of Moses, bringing a different alternative, a different paradigm. At the beginning of Surah Al-Qasas, which revolves around the model of Pharaoh, we are told, إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم يذبح أبناءهم ويستحيي نساءهم إنه كان من المفسدين. That term, fasad, which the angels used, is used here to describe the modality of Pharaoh. And what is he doing? He has elevated himself in the land, we are told, and made its people into sects and various groups, oppressing some of them, slaughtering their children and violating women. It is fascinating when we are reading this passage in the Quran that domination and hierarchy are directly connected to war and gender inequality. Gender comes as a distinct dimension in passages about war and injustice in the Quran. And immediately it is followed by what God wants on earth. It reads, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. And then it says, in the divine voice of the narrator here, we want to bless those who have been oppressed in the land and make them the imams, make them the leaders, and make them the inheritors of the land. The same sentiment we find that the meek shall inherit the earth. And then it is followed, وَنُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنُرِيَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَهَامَانَ وَجُنُودِهِمَا مِنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا يَحْذَرُونَ. And then we are told that we shall establish them in the land, those who have been oppressed, and shall show Pharaoh, Haman, and their soldiers, all that they have been fearful about. And then we are immediately taken to the mother of Moses. And the significance of this image is that it is repeated throughout the Quran. Mother and child. And again here we have been told about Pharaoh, Haman, and their soldiers. So you have the central image of patriarchy as an armed young male. And then the image you see in the religious paradigm, in contrast to that patriarchal military paradigm, a mother and a child, Moses and the child. And immediately it is followed by the story of even the Pharaoh's wife who wants to take Moses to adopt him. So even within the structures of power, women are gentle and compassionate and want to help. And then we are told, after a few verses, that فرعون وهامان وجنودهما كانوا خاطئين. Basic statement. Pharaoh, Haman, and their soldiers were wrong. Period. The Quran doesn't compromise. It presents the male-dominated military patriarchal paradigm as simply wrong. And this is running throughout the Quranic landscape. We see similar stories. I will go to one of the last revelations that deal with this issue of wanting to enforce what we want through the use of coercion. I'm going back to the story of creation, because after the story of creation, and we are told about Adam, we are told about his two sons, symbolically the first conflict of humanity, which is also mentioned in other religious texts in the Torah as well. But the interesting thing in the Quran is that the story zooms into the dialogue that takes place between the two brothers. They capture our two possibilities of how we do things.
Wow.
They're a blueprint of how we resolve our problems. Two brothers give an offering to God. One brother, his offering is accepted. The other brother, his offering is not accepted. The one who has lost the competition wants to kill his brother. We are shown here in the Quran that those who resort to killing are the ones who are already failed.
Wow. Subhanallah. Wow.
He looks at his brother and he says, I shall kill you. لأقتلنك. The other brother says, لئن بسطت إلي يدك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. He says, if you stretch your hand to kill me, I shall not raise back my hand to kill you, for I fear the Lord of all worlds. And why is that? Why he's willing not to defend himself when he is faced with the imminent threat of killing and death? And we are told in the text that he actually gets killed. Here, there is the fear of physical survivor that works in all of us. But the interesting thing, he says, I fear the Lord of all worlds. He didn't say, I fear death, because death after the moment of birth is the only certainty. It's going to happen anyway. But he chooses to be afraid of violating his brother. That becomes a bigger fear. And here we are given a new possibility of raising ourselves beyond survival.
Wow. Subhanallah.
And the interesting thing in the Quran, it is the one who gets killed that wins this battle. Because we are told after he kills his brother, that the one who killed the brother is filled with regret. He converts to the way of his brother. So even though the other died, he has already converted his brother to his way. He has won. And that is what we find captured also in the work of Gandhi. when he was not afraid of dying, but he was afraid of harming others. Do no harm. And he taught us that. I remember as a kid being somewhat bothered when he said, we don't resist the British because they are British. The British are our brothers. And what is the use of having an Indian who will oppress me just because he's Indian? He wanted to end injustice, not fight somebody else because they are different.
Yes.
And that is the challenge. It's not about our religious identities or national identities, but rather to go to the other side, to the other way of solving our problems, where we see our common humanity, where I look into you and I see a sister, where I look into you and I see a brother, when I'm afraid of violating you. And so the shift of paradigm is the central theme in the Quran. We do not resist the other because they are different. We actually want to save ourselves and them as well. They are not our enemies. Nobody is an enemy. It's the way we do things that create enemies. We think enemies are just out there. But animosity is created, is structured, and is sustained. And we have to look into the ways we do that through our discourses, through our practices. And that is why the Quran focuses on the model of Pharaoh and how we are told that he creates sects and various groups, because that is what animosity discourses focus on, our differences rather than what brings us together. When I travel around the world, I see people who are concerned about their children's well-being, about education, about work, about security, about economic well-being. Everywhere in the world, from Canada to Syria, now in India, Malaysia, North Africa. People ask me, why are you optimistic? And I say, because of what I see everywhere I go. I see brothers and sisters who want the same thing. I see that which God saw in us, the other possibility of raising above the need to do harm and to do good. Recently, I was giving a lecture on Syria in the United States, and the American students towards the end asked me, how come you are so optimistic? And I looked into their faces and I said, because of you. Look at all of you who came to hear about Syria, and look at your questions. You are so concerned. And I said, if you actually look at those who are running the world, they could probably fit in an airplane. But all of us, the rest of us, we are billions who don't want war, who want our children to have good lives, and we have so much power, and we need to see that. And all our religious traditions are based in that. And we need to revive these values, not to see our differences, but to really see that all our religious traditions are inviting us to fulfill that dawn that is looking upon us. That's why I recited that verse where God is saying, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. We want to bless those who have been oppressed in the land. God wants that. When are we going to want it? It's already there in the universe. It's just a matter that on our side to align to that divine will. And so I'm really honored to be here in India with a country that has such ethnic, religious, linguistic diversity. And as I said, you have a legacy to share to a world that's becoming increasingly cosmopolitan. You have actually won the race, and India has been that way for thousands of years. The rest of the world is just catching up. And I'm very happy to be discussing nonviolence in India, because it is really a place that has shown us not nonviolence in an ideal way, but as a practical way. And also, despite the wars that are happening, I would like to end on a positive note. Violence is decreasing in the world, everywhere, whether in crime in cities, whether in domestic violence, whether in wars. It is the most peaceful age so far. It is quite amazing, actually, to see the decline, even exponentially, of violence. Something is happening. Sociologists, psychologists, anthropologists are trying to understand this phenomena. They don't always capture it. They have various ways. But I see it as something as reflective of the other brother who is awakening in us. The one who said, I will not stretch back my hand to kill you, for I fear the Lord of all worlds. And the rise in environmental consciousness represents that alignment to the world, to the Lord of all worlds, not the Lord of human beings, but the God of the Amazon forest, the God of all the species that are threatened. We are the Khalifa here. We are the divine representative. And that doesn't give us the privilege to destroy our womb, our habitat, but rather to take care of it, because it's really our body. We are mobile creatures. But this is one organism. One biologist once said that the bee and the flower may appear separate if you look at it in a technical manner, but it is one organism. There are no flowers without bees and no bees without flowers. There is no earth, actually, without all the creatures that are part of the cycle of life. And we cannot be humans without the earth. This is our home. So we are not just asked to take care of each other, we are also asked to take care of our body, because planet Earth is our body. So the rise in environmental consciousness, the rise in the human rights discourse, the decreasing of violence, the ending of war in so many countries, the coming of women into power positions, all that are manifestations of our spiritual evolution. Sometimes, in a limited manner, people who belong to religious traditions think of their scriptures and their traditions as having ended a long time ago. But God's revelation is constantly unfolding, and we are its conduits. When God says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, when God says, we want to bless those who have been oppressed in the land, we are being invited to be part of a project. We are called upon. And are we going to respond to that? That is a question that I place to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Afra, for that wonderful